The fog rolled in thick and silent over Willow Creek, curling around the street lamps and muffling the distant hum of the highway. Maya squinted through the windshield as the headlights cut through the gray haze, illuminating the familiar curve of the road leading up to her family's house. It had been years since she'd been back, and the air smelled different somehow, heavier, damp, tinged with something metallic that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. "Are we really doing this?" Jordan muttered from the passenger seat, his eyes darting nervously over the fog-laden trees. "Maya, it's creepy here." Maya laughed, though it carried a nervous edge. "Come on, it's just a weekend at my parents' place. Nothing creepy about it. Relax." Ethan, in the back seat, leaned forward and pressed his forehead against the cool glass, staring into the shadows beyond the headlights. "Yeah, except it is creepy," he said softly. "I mean, look at it. Not a single soul around, and it's dead quiet. Even the wind seems scared to move." Maya rolled her eyes, trying to keep the mood light. "It's called atmosphere, Ethan. You'll survive one weekend." But as they pulled up the narrow driveway, the headlights caught something, or someone, darting behind a clump of trees. They froze. "What was that?" Jordan whispered. Maya shook her head, but her stomach tightened. "Probably a deer." "Or a person," Ethan said, frowning. Before anyone could respond, the house came into view, a large, old Victorian with peeling white paint and darkened windows, the kind of house that seemed charming in daylight, but in the fog and darkness took on a sinister personality of its own. The front porch sagged slightly under the weight of time, and the swing on one side creaked back and forth in a breeze that didn't exist. "See? Totally fine," Maya said, hopping out of the car and dragging her suitcase up the steps. Jordan didn't move. His eyes lingered on the trees, on the shadows between them. "I swear I saw something moving just now." Maya put a hand on his shoulder. "You're just jumpy. Come on, help me get the bags inside." The house smelled faintly of mildew and old wood. Dust motes floated in the beams of their flashlights as they carried luggage through the foyer. For a while, the tension seemed to lift, replaced by laughter and chatter as the friends settled into the familiar chaos of a weekend getaway. Maya's parents were out of town, leaving the house empty, which felt like freedom at first. It wasn't until after dinner, when they were lounging in the living room, that the first scream cut through the night. It was distant, muffled, almost like a whisper at first, but sharp enough to make all three of them freeze. "What was that?" Ethan's voice was tight. He moved to the window, peering into the foggy darkness. Maya's heart thudded in her chest. "Probably an animal." She tried to sound confident, but the rational explanation felt hollow. "No, that sounded human, like someone in real trouble." The three of them listened, tense, the fog pressing in against the windows. Then it came again, louder this time, carrying a desperation that made Maya's stomach twist. It was not playful. It was not a prank. It was a cry for help. "Call the cops!" Jordan exclaimed, fumbling for his phone. Maya's hands trembled as she tried to dial, but the line was dead. Ethan tried his phone as well. No signal. The old house seemed to swallow the devices whole. "Maybe it's coming from the other side of the woods," Ethan said, his voice low. "We should check it out." Maya shook her head. "No way! That's insane! We don't even know what it is." The screams came again, closer this time, echoing through the fog. Something moved just at the edge of the tree line, a shadow that seemed too large, too deliberate to be an animal. Their nerves tightened. Jordan backed away from the window. Maya tried to rationalize. It's probably just someone drunk or a prank. We've all been scared by things that weren't real before. Remember that horror movie marathon last summer? Ethan's eyes never left the shadows. This isn't a movie. This is real. And if someone's out there, we need to do something. The friends argued for a tense minute, each voice overlapping the other, until the screaming suddenly stopped. A silence fell over the house, so heavy it pressed in on them. Even the wind seemed to have paused. And then the front door creaked. They spun toward the sound. No one was there, only the swing on the porch, now still, and the fog pressing against the windows. Maya's hands shook as she tried the lock. Secure, but the sense of being watched was unmistakable. Jordan whispered, "Maya, we need to leave." Maya took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "We're staying inside. We lock the doors, stay together. Nothing can get us here." But as she spoke, a muffled thud came from upstairs. Footsteps, slow, methodical. "Did you hear that?" Ethan's voice was almost a growl. Maya swallowed hard. "It's the house settling. It's old." The next few hours were a tense vigil. Every creak, every shadow, every gust of wind made them jump. The friends huddled in the living room, flashlights under their faces, hearts racing. Occasionally, the faint echo of a scream or a thud would punctuate the night, reminding them that whatever was out there was not imaginary. At 2 a.m., they attempted the call again. This time, the dispatcher picked up. Maya's voice cracked as she tried to explain. "There's someone out there, screaming. I don't know. Please, you have to send someone." A long pause, then a voice, calm, flat, dismissive. "Ma'am, are you sure? No reports have come in from your area. Perhaps you're mistaken. If it's an emergency, call back with a clear signal." Maya stared at the phone, horror dawning. They had been ignored. Someone was out there screaming, and nobody would come. The friends looked at each other, the reality sinking in. Fear was no longer a shadow at the edges of the night. It was sitting in their living room, watching them, waiting. "Maybe we should investigate," Ethan said, his voice trembling but determined. Maya shook her head. "No, we stay put. We wait. We survive the night." But deep down, she knew they were already part of something far larger, something darker. The screams hadn't just awakened their fear, they had awakened the unknown, a presence that would not let them leave unchanged. Outside, the fog thickened, the shadows grew longer, and the screams, distant, echoing, human, continued. By 3 a.m., the fog outside had thickened into a near-solid wall. The street lamps were nothing but dull, blurred glows, and the trees swayed with an almost sentient motion. Maya, Ethan, and Jordan sat huddled in the living room, the earlier laughter and bravado completely gone. Their flashlights lay on the carpet, ready for any sudden movement. Every creak of the old house made them jump. Every gust of wind sounded like whispers right outside the windows. "It's quiet, too quiet," Jordan muttered, his eyes darting to the dark corners of the room. Ethan leaned forward, flashlight in hand, scanning the edges of the walls. "No, it's not quiet. It's waiting. Something's out there. I can feel it." Maya rubbed her temples, trying to calm herself. "We've been cooped up in here for hours. Maybe we just need to, I don't know, distract ourselves." She grabbed her phone, opening the camera app. "Let's document this. If anything happens, at least we'll have proof. Maybe then the police will believe us." Jordan's hand trembled as he held the flashlight toward the window, shining it out into the fog. "Or maybe the thing out there will see us," he muttered. Ignoring him, Maya started recording, narrating into the camera with as much calm as she could muster. "This is Maya. We're at my parents' house in Willow Creek. There's been screaming coming from the woods behind the house. The police haven't responded. This is real. Please, if anyone sees this—" Before she could finish, a scream erupted outside, cutting through the fog like a knife. All three froze, hearts pounding in their chests. It was closer this time, definitely human, definitely in terror. Jordan stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the coffee table. "I told you! I told you!" he shouted, panic rising in his voice. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He stood up, gripping a baseball bat that had been propped in the corner. "We have to see where it's coming from," he said firmly. His voice carried determination, but his hands were shaking. Maya hesitated. "Are you crazy? We have no idea what's out there. We could get—" Another scream cut her off, this one almost right outside the window, muffled but urgent. It didn't sound like a prank, didn't sound like any animal. It was human. Someone needed help. Reluctantly, Maya grabbed a flashlight. "Fine, but we stay together, we move slowly, and we don't let it corner us." The three stepped carefully onto the creaking porch. The fog pressed against their skin like a wet, living thing. The swings creaked gently in the still air, though there had been no wind. Ethan moved ahead, swinging the bat in front of him like a shield. Maya stayed in the middle, phone recording, and Jordan brought up the rear, constantly looking over his shoulder. They reached the edge of the woods behind the house. Branches scraped against their jackets, twigs snapped underfoot. Every rustle in the shadows made them freeze. Then Ethan spotted something. "Torn clothing," he whispered, pointing toward a small clearing. The flashlight illuminated what looked like a ripped sleeve and a blood-stained scarf half buried in the mud. Maya's stomach dropped. "Oh my God," she breathed. "It's real." Jordan whimpered. "We shouldn't be here. This is insane. Let's go back." Ethan shook his head. "No, we can't ignore this. Someone's hurt, maybe trapped. We have to see if they need help." A sudden thud behind them made all three spin. A shadow flitted through the fog, a movement too quick and deliberate to be a deer. Their hearts leapt into their throats. "Run!" Jordan yelled, but Ethan grabbed his arm. "No, we stick together. Don't let it separate us." As they continued deeper into the woods, the screaming started again, this time coming from multiple directions. It was disorienting, impossible to tell where it originated. The friends clutched each other, nerves fraying with every step. Then Maya spotted something. "Footprints," she whispered, pointing toward a small clearing. The flashlight illuminated what looked like bare feet, muddy, leading deeper into the trees, some smeared with blood. Maya's stomach dropped. "Oh my God," she breathed. "It's real." Jordan whimpered. "We shouldn't be here. This is insane. Let's go back." Ethan shook his head. "No, we can't ignore this. Someone's hurt, maybe trapped. We have to see if they need help." A sudden thud in front of them made all three spin. A shadow flitted through the fog, moving with unnatural speed. The three screamed and scattered in different directions, crashing through branches and roots. Maya tripped over a root, hitting the ground hard. She scrambled to her feet and ran, heart hammering, calling for Ethan and Jordan. She heard Ethan's voice shouting somewhere in the fog. Jordan was nowhere to be seen. After what felt like an eternity, they regrouped near the edge of the woods. Everyone was breathing heavily, clothes torn and muddy, eyes wide with terror, but the shadow was gone. "Did anyone get a good look?" Jordan asked shakily. "No," Maya whispered. "It moved too fast, too wrong." Ethan glanced back toward the clearing. "We need to tell someone, the police, someone, anyone." They returned to the house, drenched in sweat and shaking, and tried to call the authorities again, but once more the line was dead. The dispatcher, when they finally connected, dismissed them entirely. "Ma'am, you're probably imagining things. There are no reports of screaming in your area. If you're alone, lock your doors and wait until morning." Maya dropped the phone, tears of frustration and fear in her eyes. "They don't believe us." Jordan sank onto the couch, pale. Of course they don't. Who would? We sound crazy, but it's real. It's all real. The three friends sat in silence, listening as the wind rattled the windows and the fog pressed closer to the house. Somewhere out there, in the dark woods, someone or something was still screaming, and no one would believe it. The night was far from over. By the time dawn began to creep through the fog, Willow Creek had taken on a hollow, lifeless quality. The town streets were empty, shuttered windows staring like unblinking eyes. Maya, Ethan, and Jordan had barely slept, huddled together in the living room, eyes darting to every shadow, every flicker of movement. Fear had rooted itself deep in their bones. "We can't just stay here," Ethan said quietly, pacing the room. His baseball bat hung at his side, ready. "It's not over. We need to know what's out there. We need to see where the screams are coming from." Jordan shook his head violently. "I am not going back into those woods, not after last night. That thing, it's faster than us, smarter than us. We'll die out there." Maya ran a hand through her hair, anxiety gnawing at her. "I don't know if we can wait for help. The police aren't coming. No one's coming. We have to find out for ourselves, for the victims." The three argued for what felt like hours, tension building, until finally a decision was made. Armed with flashlights, a baseball bat, and an old pocket knife Jordan had insisted on bringing, they ventured back toward the foggy woods, hearts pounding and senses hyper-alert. The forest seemed different in the gray morning light, less menacing, yet somehow more alive. Every snap of a branch, every rustle in the underbrush set their nerves on edge. Maya's phone recorded the journey, though she barely noticed it. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that someone or something was waiting. As they pushed deeper, they stumbled across clear signs of struggle, scuffed dirt, broken branches, and footprints that weren't quite human in shape. The forest floor was scattered with remnants of clothing, torn shirts, muddy shoes, some partially hidden beneath leaves, some soaked in blood. "Oh my God," Maya whispered. She picked up a small piece of fabric, holding it to the light. "Someone was dragged here." Ethan's jaw tightened. "We're close. I can feel it. Whoever or whatever did this is still nearby." The screams started again, this time not distant or muffled. They were right in front of them, echoing from the trees. It was a chorus of terror, high-pitched, frantic, pleading. The sound twisted in Maya's chest, making her stomach churn. Following the noise, they rounded a bend and froze. In a small clearing stood a cabin, partially hidden behind thick trees and draped in vines. It looked abandoned at first glance, but subtle signs betrayed its use: smoke curling faintly from the chimney, fresh footprints leading to the door, and broken branches forming a rough path. "Is that a cabin?" Jordan asked, voice barely a whisper. His grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles were white. "Yes, and it's not abandoned. We need to see inside." "Are you insane? We don't even know what's in there." A scream erupted from the cabin, louder, more desperate. The sound twisted in Maya's chest, making her stomach churn. Following the noise, they rounded a bend and froze. In a small clearing stood a cabin, partially hidden behind thick trees and draped in vines. It looked abandoned at first glance, but subtle signs betrayed its use: smoke curling faintly from the chimney, fresh footprints leading to the door, and broken branches forming a rough path. "Is that a cabin?" Jordan asked, voice barely a whisper. His grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles were white. "Yes, and it's not abandoned. We need to see inside." "Are you insane? We don't even know what's in there." A scream erupted from the cabin, louder, more desperate. The sound twisted in Maya's chest, making her stomach churn. Following the noise, they rounded a bend and froze. In a small clearing stood a cabin, partially hidden behind thick trees and draped in vines. It looked abandoned at first glance, but subtle signs betrayed its use. Smoke curling faintly from the chimney, fresh footprints leading to the door, and broken branches forming a rough path. "Is that a cabin?" Jordan asked, voice barely a whisper. His grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles were white. "Yes, and it's not abandoned. We need to see inside." "Are you insane? We don't even know what's in there." A scream erupted from the cabin, louder, more desperate. The sound twisted in Maya's chest, making her stomach churn. Following the noise, they rounded a bend and froze. In a small clearing stood a cabin, partially hidden behind thick trees and draped in vines. It looked abandoned at first glance, but subtle signs betrayed its use. Smoke curling faintly from the chimney, fresh footprints leading to the door, and broken branches forming a rough path. "Is that a cabin?" Jordan asked, voice barely a whisper. His grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles were white. "Yes, and it's not abandoned. We need to see inside." "Are you insane? We don't even know what's in there." A scream erupted from the cabin, louder, more desperate. The sound twisted in Maya's chest, making her stomach churn. Following the noise, they rounded a bend and froze. In a small clearing stood a cabin, partially hidden behind thick trees and draped in vines. It looked abandoned at first glance, but subtle signs betrayed its use. Smoke curling faintly from the chimney, fresh footprints leading to the door, and broken branches forming a rough path. "Is that a cabin?" Jordan asked, voice barely a whisper. His grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles were white. "Yes, and it's not abandoned. We need to see inside." "Are you insane? We don't even know what's in there." A scream erupted from the cabin, louder, more desperate. The sound twisted in Maya's chest, making her stomach churn. Following the noise, they rounded a bend and froze. In a small clearing stood a cabin, partially hidden behind thick trees and draped in vines. It looked abandoned at first glance, but subtle signs betrayed its use. Smoke curling faintly from the chimney, fresh footprints leading to the door, and broken branches forming a rough path. "Is that a cabin?" Jordan asked, voice barely a whisper. His grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles were white. "Yes, and it's not abandoned. We need to see inside." "Are you insane? We don't even know what's in there." A scream erupted from the cabin, louder, more desperate. The sound twisted in Maya's chest, making her stomach churn. Following the noise, they rounded a bend and froze. In a small clearing stood a cabin, partially hidden behind thick trees and draped in vines. It looked abandoned at first glance, but subtle signs betrayed its use. Smoke curling faintly from the chimney, fresh footprints leading to the door, and broken branches forming a rough path. "Is that a cabin?" Jordan asked, voice barely a whisper. His grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles were white. "Yes, and it's not abandoned. We need to see inside." "Are you insane? We don't even know what's in there." A scream erupted from the cabin, louder, more desperate. The sound twisted in Maya's chest, making her stomach churn. Following the noise, they rounded a bend and froze. In a small clearing stood a cabin, partially hidden behind thick trees and draped in vines. It looked abandoned at first glance, but subtle signs betrayed its use. Smoke curling faintly from the chimney, fresh footprints leading to the door, and broken branches forming a rough path. "Is that a cabin?" Jordan asked, voice barely a whisper. His grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles were white. "Yes, and it's not abandoned. We need to see inside." "Are you insane? We don't even know what's in there." A scream erupted from the cabin, louder, more desperate. The sound twisted in Maya's chest, making her stomach churn. Following the noise, they rounded a bend and froze. In a small clearing stood a cabin, partially hidden behind thick trees and draped in vines. It looked abandoned at first glance, but subtle signs betrayed its use. Smoke curling faintly from the chimney, fresh footprints leading to the door, and broken branches forming a rough path. "Is that a cabin?" Jordan asked, voice barely a whisper. His grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles were white. "Yes, and it's not abandoned. We need to see inside." "Are you insane? We don't even know what's in there." A scream erupted from the cabin, louder, more desperate. The sound twisted in Maya's chest, making her stomach churn. Following the noise, they rounded a bend and froze. In a small clearing stood a cabin, partially hidden behind thick trees and draped in vines. It looked abandoned at first glance, but subtle signs betrayed its use. Smoke curling faintly from the chimney, fresh footprints leading to the door, and broken branches forming a rough path. "Is that a cabin?" Jordan asked, voice barely a whisper. His grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles were white. "Yes, and it's not abandoned. We need to see inside." "Are you insane? We don't even know what's in there." A scream erupted from the cabin, louder, more desperate. The sound twisted in Maya's chest, making her stomach churn. Following the noise, they rounded a bend and froze. In a small clearing stood a cabin, partially hidden behind thick trees and draped in vines. It looked abandoned. The fog had finally begun to lift, revealing the small town of Willow Creek in the pale light of early morning. But the town felt alien, stripped of warmth. The streets were deserted, the shutters closed, and the stillness pressed down on Maya, Ethan, and Jordan like a physical weight. They were battered, muddy, and exhausted, yet every nerve in their body screamed that the danger had not passed. "We need to tell someone," Maya said, voice trembling. Her hands shook as she clutched her phone, hoping against hope that this time the call would connect. "The police! Someone has to believe us now." Ethan gave her a hard look. "You think they'll believe 3 scared kids covered in mud, rambling about monsters in the woods?" Jordan, still shaking violently, muttered, "They'll lock us up. They'll say we're crazy." Maya's throat tightened. "We have to try." They trudged through the foggy streets to the police station. The building looked just as they remembered it, except emptier and colder somehow. Maya rang the bell repeatedly, her heart hammering. Finally, an officer appeared, bleary-eyed, a cup of coffee in hand. "Yes, can I help you?" he asked, voice groggy. Maya stepped forward, showing him her phone. "There's a cabin in the woods. People have been taken. Screams all night. We saw evidence. Please, you have to believe us." The officer raised an eyebrow, peering at the 3 friends as though evaluating their sanity. "Evidence?" he asked slowly. "You do realize it's nearly dawn. No one else reported anything, right?" Maya's stomach dropped. "Yes, but you have to check the woods. Please, look at these videos." She handed him the phone. He tapped the screen, and the video files were gone, blank, corrupted, completely erased. "Ma'am, nothing here. Are you sure you didn't dream this?" Jordan cried out in frustration. "We didn't dream it. We saw it." The officer sighed, clearly unwilling to engage further. "Listen, I'm not saying you're lying, but without proof, you're wasting your time. Go home. Call if something concrete happens." Maya felt the walls close in around her. "No, they're still out there." The officer shook his head and closed the door, leaving them in the cold morning air. Their pleas had fallen on deaf ears. As they walked back toward Maya's house, the unease that had clung to them all night didn't let up. Every shadow, every glint in the fog made them jump. They tried to talk to reassure each other, but every sentence ended in nervous silence. Maybe we didn't see it," Jordan said finally, voice shaky. Maybe we were just imagining things. Ethan turned sharply. No, we saw it. We know it's real. That's all that matters. Maybe no one else believes us, but we do. Maya's phone buzzed suddenly. She fumbled for it and froze. A text message flashed across the screen. You weren't supposed to survive. Leave now. Her hands trembled as she showed it to Ethan and Jordan. The three of them stared at each other, fear etched into every line of their faces. Whoever or whatever was behind this had followed them back into town. We have to leave Willow Creek, Ethan whispered. We can't stay here, not one more second. They hastily packed a few essentials into their bags and drove out of town, eyes scanning the foggy streets for any sign of movement. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional distant sound that might have been wind or something else. Hours passed in tense silence. Every passing car or distant figure set their hearts racing. They stopped only at a gas station on the outskirts of the town, desperate for food and supplies. But even here, unease gnawed at them. The cashier was polite, but distant, eyes flicking toward the fog outside as if sensing something unseen. That's it, Maya whispered, sliding into the car. We can't stay anywhere in this town. We have to go as far as possible. Ethan nodded, gripping the wheel. Agreed, and we need to stick together. No splitting up. Jordan shivered in the back seat. Do you think anyone will ever believe us? Maya swallowed hard. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. We survived. That's what matters. For now. As they drove away, the fog began to thin, revealing the highway stretching endlessly ahead. For a moment, relief washed over them. Maybe the nightmare was behind them. But then, just as the sun began to rise, a scream echoed in the distance, not far off, not muffled, but sharp, clear, and human. They froze, each of them gripping the car doors. Maya's eyes widened in horror. That's the same scream. Ethan turned slowly, scanning the foggy horizon. No, it can't be. We left. The scream repeated closer this time, echoing off the trees lining the road. They could see nothing, but the sound carried an unmistakable weight, a plea, a warning, a threat. Jordan pressed his head against the seat. It's following us. It never left us. Maya's hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel. We keep moving. We don't stop. We don't look back. Nothing can make us stop. Hours later, when the road finally stretched into the open countryside, the fog dissipated completely. For the first time in what felt like forever, they saw the sun breaking through the clouds. The scream had faded, replaced by silence, but none of them dared to celebrate. They knew the horror they had witnessed wasn't gone. Maya, glancing in the rearview mirror, caught a glimpse of something or someone standing at the edge of the fog, watching them go. A shadow too still, too deliberate, before it vanished into the morning light. They didn't speak. Words were useless now. The three of them knew the terrifying truth. The screams, the cabin, the shadow, none of it was over, and no one would ever believe them. The story ends with them driving into the unknown, haunted, scarred, and hyper-aware that the terror they had witnessed in the woods might be waiting anywhere, ready to strike again. Even as the sunlight spread across the horizon, the chilling echo of screams lingered in their minds, a reminder that some horrors do not stay in the dark. They follow, they watch, and nobody believes.